The NFL draft is finally upon us, and with it comes a big breath of fresh air. Teams are trying to better their rosters, but this season's draft keeps getting labeled as quote-unquote mysterious.
Yeah.
What makes this draft different than maybe other drafts that you've seen?
Quarterback. A year ago was more conventional. You had Jacksonville with the first pick. You had Trevor Lawrence, who everybody knew merited that pick. They couldn't trick anybody. It was really clear that
all of the mock drafts said the same thing.
Right. It was the easiest one. And if you go back decades and decades and decades, Troy Aikman as the first overall pick in his draft, easy and obvious, and you had a really good idea of what was going to happen next. And probably the same thing with Lawrence. This draft class doesn't have that guy. There's 4 guys that might go in the first round, but none of the 4 might have a quote first round grade on them. So the mystery and the unpredictability of this draft starts at quarterback, where you don't know, and you don't necessarily know that you don't know.
Right.
Can Malik Willis play? I don't. He played at Liberty. I don't know. Again, we don't play scout on this show. So, but I don't think scouts can be sure either. Matt Corral at Ole Miss, is he a bad guy?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because they don't think so there.
Right.
But there's people in the league who say so. So on and on and on we can go with question marks and red flags and doubt, and that's what adds to the mystery and the intrigue and the fun. It's fun unless you're one of those guys who's getting doubted. That part's not very fun. But for the rest of us, it's fascinating, of course.
And more NFL news is that for the first time ever, the NFL wants to have a triple header on Christmas. Now, this Christmas falls on a Monday, so this works out perfectly for the league. And they say, with all respect to our friends at the NBA, what do you think of this move?
Well, of course, the NBA kind of created the idea, and a lot of people, including us who love the NBA, recognize Christmas as it's kind of like second opening day. But the NFL is the big bully in the schoolyard, and it's going to do what it's going to do, and the NBA is simply going to have to bow to whatever the NFL wants. Think of what the NFL has done in terms of just like manifest destiny. They started going to Europe in the 80s, and it made no sense. Okay, but now here we are 40 years later, and you realize what the idea was. There's money to be made on TV in Europe. There's fans to be had. Imagine if today Major League Baseball said, we're going to start playing games in Europe. You go, why? Well, the payoff might be in 40 years. Well, the NFL is smart enough to bully their way and elbow their way to a payoff, and they will do it on Christmas.
And they've smelled success on Thanksgiving, and they're like, wait a minute, we could gobble this up a little bit later in the year.
Yeah, Mark Cuban, the Dallas Mavericks owner, said a few years ago, he was talking about the difference between, what was it, hogs and who gets slaughtered, and he was trying to say, you're at the trough too much, NFL. You're hogging it. That was 15 years ago, and he was trying to say you will end up getting slaughtered by your own gluttony. Well, he's wrong. I thought he was right then. I thought here we are 15 years later. There's no end in sight, and now we've got multiple games on Christmas, and games are on Monday and Thursday, and opening weekends, there's multiple games on Monday Night Football.
We're adding games to the regular season.
I don't know when enough is enough for the audience. We could use a break. I could use a day. You and me could use a day off. But the gluttony continues to just pay off for the NFL.
The NFL is certainly a quarterback league, however, so when we look at the Los Angeles Rams, as they are going to try to defend their Super Bowl title, what is the biggest question mark that revolves for quarterback Matthew Stafford?
Yeah, they've done everything right in terms of making sure he stays protected. It's not like Matthew Stafford was the perfect quarterback, and the people here with the Rams understand that, but he was a great talent waiting to go into a perfect situation.
With a fresh slate.
Absolutely. And, he recently did the TV commercial in which he jokes about turning in his old phone. And he said, I had this phone for 12 years, and I love this phone, and I'll always remember this phone fondly, but it's time for a new phone. And it just hits every right note, just like Matthew Stafford and the Rams have done.
Right. Well, when we look at the Atlanta Falcons and Marcus Mariota, What is the biggest question mark there for Marcus?
I love that he says, I'm tired of getting kicked around and beat up.
Yeah.
I love that he says, I want to be the starting quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. I also admire that he says, I'm here to compete for that job. Obviously, this is you don't get much higher pick than him in his draft, and yet obviously his career hasn't worked out the way he would have hoped. This is a fresh start for him in Atlanta, and at the very least, he's the bridge starter. The question, and he's going to be watching Thursday night, just like the rest of us are, just like everybody in Atlanta and Georgia is, because if they take a quarterback, that'll be the sign. It doesn't mean that Mariota doesn't start for the first half of this season, but if Mariota's job here with the Falcons is to help Malik Willis develop into someday being a better quarterback than Marcus himself quite got to be, then I have complete faith that he'll do that job and do it well.
And hopefully they get some pass catchers as well.
That would help too.
When we look at the Washington Commanders and new quarterback Carson Wentz, what do you think is the biggest question mark for Carson?
They whisper about him. I don't know if they've held a press conference here with the Commanders. He is the guy, he's the long-term guy, we're never going to look back. But they whisper that he's not a bridge quarterback. And maybe you say that because you look at this draft and realize we're not going to get a more talented quarterback than Carson Wentz. Not out of this draft. And I think that observation would be true. If you could peel off all the junk that's happened to Carson Wentz and with Carson Wentz, some of it his own fault, and just look at his blue chipness in his draft. If Carson Wentz was in this draft, he'd
be the best.
He'd easily be the most talented one. And so that might be reason enough for them to say, let's believe in Carson Wentz and let's add some weaponry for him. I think this Washington team is right on the verge of being right up there with the Cowboys again in the NFC East. And solid quarterback play, not spectacular quarterback play. Solid quarterback play when they got 2 years ago helped them win the division. Solid quarterback play for 17 games now could put them in contention again.
Now let's look at the New England Patriots, who are also competing to try to get to the top of their division with the Buffalo Bills. You've got Mac Jones there at quarterback. What do you think is Mac's biggest question mark as he heads into this season?
I think that there was a question about Bill Belichick versus Tom Brady, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. And what we've now discovered about Belichick here in New England, and we should not be surprised, Patriots fans aren't surprised. Obviously, Brady was a major part of the equation. But they stayed competitive with Cam Newton. And now all of a sudden they're going to be more than competitive with Mac Jones. And
his ceiling is high.
Correct. And part of the reason his ceiling is high is because his coach has no ceiling. What Bill Belichick has done with different personnel, different systems, and now different quarterbacks is why he may be the greatest football coach of all time. It's also why Robert Kraft the other day said, because Bill just turned 70, but maybe 10 more years. 10 more years of Belichick on the sideline. I don't know if that's Bill's plan, but I can understand why it's Robert Kraft's plan. And Mac Jones is probably saying, fine by me, because I'd like to be here 10 years with Belichick as well.
For sure. 10 years of Bill, maybe that will equal just to surpass Tom Brady before he retires, right? I don't know. Maybe Tom can hang out another 10 years. In the
NFL? Brady has given out a couple interviews, and of course he unretired and retired and then whatever. But he recently did an interview saying, I could play till 50. My body, he turns 45 on August 3rd, as I'm sure Patriots fans know, and probably celebrate Brady Day. And he's talked about how I could do it physically, even though it'd be very challenging. I can feel how challenging it is now at 44 versus 34 and 24. But he wants to be devoted to doing this one more time with Tampa Bay, and then go home and be as devoted a family guy as he is a quarterback. So he says I could physically do it. I'm probably going to choose not to do it because I'm going to go choose to do something with that little one, and my wife.
Oh.